My name is Amelia Alzando, and all my life I've been the one everyone leaned on. The responsible one, the quiet fixer, the person who never got thanked. Today was supposed to be different. Today was my wedding day. Today I was supposed to exist in my own story, not the shadow of everyone else's chaos. The venue looked like it had been pulled straight from a dream. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above the dance floor, casting a soft glow on tables dressed in ivory linens. The scent of roses and fresh jasmine hung in the air, mingling with a faint hint of vanilla candles. There was a hum of happiness everywhere, guests laughing, glasses clinking, children darting between tables, but for the first time in my life I felt it too. A calm that wasn't forced. A moment that belonged to me. Daniel squeezed my hand, gently leaning in close. "You're glowing," he whispered. His voice, warm and low, made the nervous flutter in my stomach feel steady, like a heartbeat I could finally trust. He didn't say we, didn't say our. He said you. That single word felt heavier than anything anyone had ever said to me before. I smiled, thinking that nothing could touch this night. I imagined walking down the aisle, the music swelling, our friends and family cheering. This was supposed to be perfect. Until the door opened. I saw her before anyone else did. My sister, dressed in white. Not ivory, not champagne, not a hint of blush, actual wedding white. She walked in like she owned the room, like she was the main event rather than the guest at her own sister's wedding. She moved gracefully, like someone who had rehearsed the impact she wanted to make. And the room noticed immediately. Conversation stuttered. Laughter froze mid-chuckle. A few heads turned toward the entrance, whispers trailing in her wake. Daniel's grip on my hand tightened instinctively. "Amelia!" he murmured, his eyes searching mine. I shook my head slightly. Not now. Not tonight. I wasn't going to let her ruin what was mine. She floated toward the center, smiling as if the entire venue existed solely for her effect. Her presence carried that old talent of hers, the one that always left chaos behind without fingerprints, leaving me to clean up the pieces. I wanted to call her out, to demand some sense of decency, but I forced a smile. I laughed politely when introductions were made. I danced when prompted. I posed for photos, though every click of the camera felt like I was pretending, like the joy captured on film wasn't mine to claim. For a while, I told myself it was manageable, that she had her moment, that her show of theatrics would fade like a storm over a summer lake. But weddings have a way of magnifying personalities, and hers wasn't one that faded quietly. Dinner passed. The first dance passed. The speeches passed. And still, she lingered, eyes sharp, smile fixed, soaking in the attention like she was fueled by it. Some guests began to whisper again, small comments I could barely catch. "Is that really? She's wearing white." My stomach tightened. Daniel kept his hand in mine, trying to ground me, and I tried to return the calm he exuded. I reminded myself of all the reasons I had planned this carefully, the seating chart, the flowers, the playlist, all so that tonight could feel like my night, despite her presence. My sister thrived on spectacle, but I thrived on control, and I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing she could touch me here, not tonight. The first hint that she might not be content with subtle disruption came near the end of dinner. She rose gracefully, a wine glass in her hand. The timing was uncanny. Soft lighting. Everyone relaxed. Music lowered just enough that the hum of conversation gave her a perfect stage. For a moment, I thought maybe she would make a kind gesture, maybe pretend for appearances. But she didn't. She smiled, and I knew that smile. It was the one that promised trouble. I swallowed hard, feeling every nerve in my body alert. My hand clenched Daniel's tighter, but I didn't say anything. I wasn't going to let her script the night's chaos, not while I could still control my reaction. My eyes met hers, searching for hesitation, a crack in the armor. There was none. She had planned this. I kept moving, played my part, laughed at the jokes, nodded politely at compliments. Every fiber in me was aware that tonight was a test, but I wouldn't fail. Not for her. Not for the family that had always expected me to absorb everything without question. Tonight, I would survive her. And perhaps, just perhaps, I would reclaim a tiny corner of the happiness that had always eluded me. By the time dessert was served, my body had settled into a strange kind of alert calm. The kind you get when you know something bad is coming but don't know exactly when. Every laugh in the room felt a second too loud. Every clink of a fork against a plate made my shoulders tense. I smiled anyway. I always did. That was my role. Make things smooth, make things quiet, make things easier for everyone else. Daniel leaned close and brushed his thumb over my knuckles. "You're doing great," he said softly, like he could sense the storm building inside me. I nodded, grateful for him, for the steadiness in his voice. He had no idea how much energy it was taking just to sit there, to pretend this night hadn't already been invaded. My sister hadn't spoken to me once. Not congratulations. Not a smile meant just for me. Nothing. She moved from table to table, collecting attention like souvenirs, laughing too loudly, touching arms, telling half-stories that made people lean in closer. I didn't need to hear the words to know the tone. I'd lived with it my whole life. The subtle rewriting of reality. The way she could make herself the victim in any story, even on someone else's wedding day. When the music softened and people began to relax again, I almost believed we were in the clear. Almost. I stood to thank a group of relatives who were leaving early, hugged an old friend, adjusted my dress. That's when I heard the scrape of a chair behind me. My sister stood. She held a glass of red wine in her hand, fingers perfectly manicured, posture straight, smile calm. The room quieted instinctively, like it always did when someone stood with purpose. People assumed a toast was coming. They always did. My heart dropped, heavy and fast, settling somewhere near my stomach. Daniel turned toward her, confused. "Is she?" he started. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My eyes were locked on her face, searching for something. Hesitation, doubt, restraint. I found none. She raised her glass slightly and cleared her throat. "I wasn't planning on saying anything tonight," she began, her voice smooth, practiced. A lie, but a convincing one. But some moments just deserve honesty. A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the room. I felt heat rise up my neck. "Please don't," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was speaking to, her, myself, or the universe. She turned her head toward me slowly, like she wanted everyone to follow her gaze. "Cheers," she said, lifting her glass higher, "to the family liar in white." The words landed before the wine did. For a split second, my brain refused to process what I'd heard. Family liar. The phrase echoed, sharp and accusing, slicing through the air. Then she moved. The wine flew. It hit my chest first, cold and violent, soaking instantly into the front of my dress. Red bloomed across the fabric, spreading fast, dripping down my arms, splattering onto the floor. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed nervously, thinking it had to be a joke. It wasn't. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered somewhere behind me. I didn't turn to look. I was staring down at myself, at the stain, at the way something so carefully chosen had been ruined in a second. The room went silent. I could feel 100 eyes on me, on my dress, on my face. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I lifted my head slowly, meeting her gaze. She looked satisfied, calm, like she'd just corrected a wrong. My mother rushed forward, grabbing my sister's wrist. "What are you doing?" she hissed. Her voice panicked, embarrassed, not for me but for the scene. My sister shrugged her off. "I'm done pretending," she said loudly. "I'm done covering for her. Covering for me." Daniel stepped forward, his face pale with shock and anger. "Get away from her," he said, his voice tight. I'd never heard him sound like that before. Someone pulled him back gently. A chair scraped. Another guest stood up abruptly. I could feel the tension buzzing, sharp and electric, like the air before a storm breaks. I finally moved. Not toward her. Not toward my parents. I walked away. Each step felt heavy, deliberate. I could hear whispers starting again, louder this time, confused and hungry. I didn't look back. I went straight to the restroom, locked myself into a stall, and stared at the red stains soaking deeper into the fabric. This wasn't an accident. This was a declaration. I changed into the backup dress I'd packed for emergencies. Spilled drinks, torn seams, anything except this. My hands were steady as I changed, calmer than I felt. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My eyes were dry. My face was composed. Something inside me had gone very, very still. When I walked back out, Daniel was waiting. His jaw was clenched, his eyes searching my face. "We can leave," he said immediately. "Right now." I shook my head. "No," I said quietly. "We finish this." And I meant it. Because if she thought humiliating me was the end of the story, she was wrong. She'd taken her shot in public. She'd said her line. But she had no idea what I was about to stop doing in private. We finished the night. That part still surprises people when I tell them. They expect drama, me collapsing into tears, Daniel storming out, security escorting my sister away. None of that happened. The band kept playing. The cake was cut. Guests hugged me a little too tightly, their sympathy clumsy and unspoken. My sister disappeared at some point, swallowed by the chaos she'd created. My parents hovered, apologizing in fragments that never quite reached accountability. Daniel stayed close, his hand never leaving my back. He didn't ask questions. He didn't push. He understood something fundamental in that moment, that whatever I was holding together wasn't meant to be examined yet. He let me lead. By the time we left the venue, the night felt unreal, like something I'd watched happen to someone else. The drive home was quiet, not tense, just still. Daniel glanced at me once, his voice gentle. "I'm proud of you," he said. I nodded. I believed him. He fell asleep quickly, exhaustion finally catching up with him. I didn't. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, still wearing my makeup, listening to the unfamiliar silence of our new life. No family voices, no expectations, just space. That's when it happened. Not anger, not revenge. Clarity. I realized something I had never allowed myself to say out loud. My sister hadn't ruined my wedding. She had revealed something. And once something is revealed, you can't pretend it didn't happen. I went to the kitchen and made coffee even though it was nearly 3 a.m. I opened my laptop and logged into the account, the shared one. The one I'd created temporarily years ago when my sister said she just needed help getting back on her feet. Tuition transfers, rent coverage, emergency funds, the safety net that had quietly become her entire foundation. My name was on everything. I stared at the screen for a long time. I thought about the wine dripping down my arms, about my mother grabbing my sister's wrist, not to protect me, but to quiet the embarrassment, about the way no one had stood up and said, "This is unacceptable." I froze the account. No message, no warning, no explanation, just one click. At 8:37 a.m., the university attempted to process her tuition payment. At 8:38, it failed. At 8:39, her enrollment was flagged. At 8:41, my phone started ringing. I didn't answer. Daniel was still asleep upstairs, wrapped in the afterglow of our wedding night. I wasn't going to let my family invade the first morning of our marriage. I watched the screen light up again and again. My mother's name, my father's number, an unknown caller I didn't recognize. A text came through. "What did you do?" I typed back one word. Nothing. And for the first time in my life, it was almost true. By the time Daniel came downstairs, rubbing sleep from his eyes, there were 12 missed calls. He poured coffee, kissed my forehead, and asked, "Are you okay?" "Yes," I said. That wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth yet. When I finally answered my father's call, his voice was sharp and already angry. "No congratulations. No concern. Do you understand how serious this is?" he demanded. "Yes," I said calmly. "Her tuition payment didn't go through. The university doesn't wait around. If this isn't fixed immediately—" "It won't be," I said. Silence. "You don't mean that." I looked out the window at the morning light spilling across the counter, feeling something solid settle into my chest. "You don't know me as well as you think." He exhaled sharply. "This has nothing to do with the wedding." "It has everything to do with it," I replied. And before he could redirect the conversation, before the guilt could be unpacked and handed back to me, I hung up. The voicemail started after that. My mother's voice cycled through familiar stages. Panic, anger, confusion, then the soft, wounded tone she always used when she wanted me to feel cruel. "She made a mistake," she said in one message. "Weddings are emotional. Don't punish her for one moment." One moment. I deleted the rest without listening. After Daniel left for a short walk, his way of giving me space without asking, I logged into another account. The health insurance policy. My sister had been listed as a dependent for almost 2 years. Temporary, we'd said. Just until she figured things out. I removed her name. Next, the student loan portal. Loans tied to my credit. My responsibility. I canceled the automatic payments I'd set up to protect her from default. 30 days. That's all she had. I didn't feel cruel. I felt finished. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. My sister had chosen spectacle. I chose boundaries. When Daniel came back, he watched me quietly close my laptop. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked. "It's handled," I said. He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. He didn't ask for details. He trusted me enough to know that handled meant I had finally stopped bleeding quietly. And that was when the screaming stopped. Not because they were done, but because they were regrouping. The silence lasted 2 days. No calls. No messages. No apologies. At first, I thought maybe they were finally thinking, replaying the wedding, confronting what had happened. But I knew my family better than that. Silence wasn't reflection. It was strategy. On the 3rd day, my mother tried a different approach. She sent a photo. It was my sister's university acceptance letter from years ago, edges yellowed, like nostalgia itself could undo consequences. No words at first. Just the image. Then another message followed. People make mistakes. Stress changes behavior. Family forgives. No mention of the wine. No acknowledgement of the words she'd used. No apology. Just a gentle attempt to reset the board. I didn't reply. That's when she crossed a line she'd never crossed before. She messaged Daniel. I found out because he read it out loud while we were brushing our teeth, toothpaste foam frozen on his lip. She said I was being controlling, that I was punishing my sister. She suggested, carefully, politely, that he should be cautious about someone who could be this cold. Daniel blinked at the mirror. Then he looked at me. And then, unexpectedly, we both laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. That was the moment I understood something crucial. They weren't trying to fix anything. They were trying to shame me back into my role. The stable one. The fixer. The one who absorbed damage so everyone else could stay comfortable. I sent my mother one sentence. If she apologizes directly to Daniel, I'll consider talking. There was no response. My sister doesn't apologize. Especially not to other women. Especially not when she thinks she's still owed something. The cousin started next. Long messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Warm greetings followed by pressure disguised as concern. You're the strong one. She's always been sensitive. You know how she is. That last line hit harder than all the rest. You know how she is. It wasn't a description. It was a demand. Be the one who bends. Be the one who sacrifices again. Be the one who fixes this. Not this time. I made a call I hadn't planned to make. The university. Her enrollment was officially withdrawn. The deadline had passed. Housing tied to enrollment gone. She had 2 weeks to move out. She hadn't told anyone. On day 6, my sister finally messaged me. A thumbs up emoji. No words. No apology. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. I didn't respond. The next day, she left a voicemail, breezy and irritated, like we were still partners in some arrangement. Hey, the account must have glitched. They're saying my rent bounced. Can you fix it? Then a text. They're telling me I have to move out by Friday. You're seriously going to let that happen? Yes. That was my answer, even if I didn't send it. Instead, she posted a photo on Instagram. Smiling. Holding a wine glass. Caption. Some people are really good at pretending. She tagged me. I didn't engage. I contacted the Scholarship Foundation instead. The one she'd been bragging about, the one I'd helped her secure. I withdrew my endorsement and attached the enrollment withdrawal notice. By the next afternoon, the scholarship was gone. That's when the panic started. She called me, voice shaking, anger cracking through it. She accused me of ruining her life. Asked what I wanted. Money. A public apology. A post clearing her name. There's nothing you can offer, I said calmly. You're my sister, she snapped. Yeah, I replied quietly. That used to mean something. I hung up. By Friday, she was officially evicted. My phone lit up nonstop. Family messages blurred together. Accusations wrapped in concern curdling into blame. An aunt said what I was doing was extreme. A cousin suggested therapy. Someone else said I was punishing her for being emotional. No one called it extreme when I paid her bills. No one called it extreme when I stayed silent through insults. No one called it extreme when I absorbed humiliation so holidays could stay pleasant. I wasn't the villain for helping. I was the villain for stopping. My father texted late that night. "Do you want a relationship with your family or not?" I stared at the message for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it clarified everything. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about compliance. I replied with 3 words. "Not like this." He didn't answer. That silence felt final. The next call didn't come from my family. It came from Daniel's parents. His mother spoke first, her voice calm in a way that felt unfamiliar after days of emotional noise. "We heard what happened," she said. "And we just want you to know we see you." That sentence landed harder than all the accusations combined. We had dinner with them that weekend. No raised voices. No guilt. Just listening. Daniel filled in the parts one hadn't shared yet, his hand resting on my knee like an anchor. His father leaned back after a long pause and said, "Sounds like you're done playing the role they assigned you." I nodded. I hadn't known how to say it out loud before, but that was exactly it. The updates about my sister started coming secondhand after that. Pieces of information passed through relatives I no longer spoke to directly. She'd moved in with a friend. Then someone else. The story kept shifting, always missing details, always framing her as unlucky instead of accountable. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. I knew who it was from before I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "I don't expect anything from you anymore. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. No apology. No request. Just that." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not because it moved me, but because I needed to remember that trying and taking responsibility aren't the same thing. 3 quiet weeks passed. Then, out of nowhere, Jason, my sister's ex-boyfriend, knocked on our door. He looked exhausted, like someone who had been carrying weight he didn't know how to put down. "I ran into her," he said. "She's staying at a pay-by-the-week motel." He hesitated, then handed me a folded paper. "She's pregnant. 6 weeks. No demand. No accusation. Just information." I sat at the kitchen table holding that paper long after he left, waiting for guilt to arrive. It didn't. What I felt was clarity. Because now I understood this had never been about wine or money or school. My sister's life had been unraveling for years, and I had been the thread holding it together. The difference now was that she wasn't using the chaos to manipulate me. She was just spiraling. And for the first time, I wasn't stepping in. I folded the clinic paper and placed it in the same drawer as the letters. Not to hide it, but to acknowledge it without taking ownership of it. A month earlier, that information would have sent me into planning mode. Timelines, budgets, conversations with my parents, damage control. Instead, I went on with my life. Daniel and I unpacked wedding gifts we'd been too emotionally drained to touch before. We argued about where to hang a painting. We burned dinner one night and laughed about it. Ordinary moments. Healing ones. The silence from my family stretched longer than I expected. No cousins checking in. No carefully worded guilt. No pressure. It was like a machine that couldn't function without my constant input. Then my father called. His voice was tired. Not angry. Not sharp. Just worn down. "She told us everything," he said. "About the school. The eviction. The scholarship." I waited. And about the pregnancy. There it was. My mother took the phone. I could hear her breathing before she spoke. "She's scared," she said. "She needs help." This was the moment they expected me to fold. To step back into position. To absorb it all and make it disappear. "I know she's scared," I said. I was scared too. For years. Silence. "What are we supposed to do?" my mother asked. The question wasn't about my sister. It was about me. About whether I would come back. "You're going to let her face what she's built," I said quietly. My mother cried. "So that's it? You're just done." I thought about my wedding. The wine. The way she'd rushed to my sister while I stood soaked and silent. "I'm not done," I said. "I'm just not sacrificing myself anymore." She didn't argue. That told me everything. The final conversation with my family didn't happen in a dramatic showdown. It happened quietly, 6 months after the wedding, my mother sent a message asking if we could meet. Just her. No sister. No father. No family discussion. I agreed, not because I owed her, but because I no longer feared what she might say. We met at a small cafe halfway between our homes. Neutral ground. She looked older. Not fragile, just tired in a way that comes from years of avoiding accountability. After we ordered, she didn't speak right away. She stared into her cup like the answers might rise with the steam. "She's keeping the baby," she finally said. I nodded. I already knew. "She's moving back home." I waited again. "We'll help her this time," my mother added quickly, like she needed me to believe that. "I hope you do," I said calmly. That wasn't the response she expected. She frowned slightly. "That's it? No advice? No plan?" I smiled, not unkindly. "You've never listened to my advice before." The truth landed between us without anger. She sighed. "She keeps asking about you." I didn't respond immediately. I thought about the girl who had thrown a drink in my face and toasted to my humiliation. The sister who had let me be blamed so she could stay comfortable. The parents who had stood beside her, not me. "She can ask," I said, "but I'm not responsible for fixing her life." My mother looked at me for a long moment, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "You've changed." "No," I replied softly. "I stopped pretending." When we stood to leave, she hesitated. "Will you ever forgive her?" I considered the question carefully. "Forgiveness isn't access," I said, "and healing doesn't require reconciliation." She didn't argue. That told me everything. A year passed. Life didn't suddenly become perfect, but it became peaceful. Daniel and I moved into a slightly bigger apartment. We hosted friends who laughed loudly and stayed late. We built routines that didn't involve walking on eggshells. For the first time, holidays felt warm instead of heavy. One afternoon, a message came through from an unknown number. It was my sister. "I'm not asking you to come back," she wrote. "I just wanted you to know. I finally understand why you left." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed a single sentence. "I hope you build a life that doesn't need someone else to carry it." And that was it. No long conversation. No reopening wounds. Just honesty, without surrender. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not standing up at my wedding and exposing the truth. I don't, because the truth revealed itself anyway. Not through shouting, but through absence. When I stopped cleaning up their messes, the mess stayed visible. When I stopped apologizing, the blame lost its target. When I stopped being the family's emotional shield, they had to face the damage they'd ignored for years. My sister didn't ruin my wedding. She revealed the role I'd been forced to play my entire life. And once I saw it clearly, I never stepped back into it again. The drink she threw at me soaked into my dress, but it also washed something away. Fear. Guilt. The belief that love had to hurt to be real. Now, when I look back at my wedding photos, I don't focus on the stain that was professionally cleaned. I remember the moment I realized something far more important. I wasn't the family liar. I was the truth they couldn't control anymore.